Alright, before I get started, I should probably cover a few things first. Yes, I'm Australian, hence my accent, and this is my first commentary, so don't expect it to be incredibly smooth. And the issues discussed in this video are my opinion, man, that just because I see them as issues does not necessarily mean they are universally considered as issues. The background gameplay you're seeing is me getting a We Ran Out of Metals medal in Control on Rusted Lands, but depending on how long this commentary goes for, I may have to make a separate video with separate gameplays. We'll see how we go. Okay, to begin, I should preface this discussion with some of my history in Destiny. I purchased the game at launch, meaning I didn't pre-order the game, nor did I watch any gameplay or know anything about the game besides it being a first-person shooter. As a PlayStation player, I had never particularly watched, let alone played any Halo titles, so I didn't know specifically how Bungie developed games performed, besides the positive comments I had heard from Halo players. That being said, I purchased the game in September, particularly due to Call of Duty Ghosts being the current COD, and the game definitely not having the legs to survive for an entire year. After finishing the campaign on the very first day, including most of the strikes, I was very surprised that a game with a multiple year development period and extraordinary budget would only provide 8 to 12 hours of content at launch, which I only learned after I completed the campaign. At this stage though, I wasn't feeling pessimistic about Destiny, as I'm sure many people, including myself, felt there was plenty more content coming, potentially even free content, but that swiftly changed when we saw the release of The Dark Below and what little content that had to offer. Despite my concerns and frustration with the repetitive strikes and story missions, I played Destiny daily as the initial leveling system and the hunt for legendaries and exotics definitely kept me interested. It wasn't until Crota came around that I actually discovered the strength of Yellowhorn and how important it was for me to acquire it. It's only made the grinding problem worse though, because at this stage I was deleting my third character every day and re-leveling it, just to rerun Crota and the Nightfall in a desperate attempt to win against RNG. This brings up the first of many problems with Destiny, the random loot system. I admit the idea of random loot can be exciting, and entices the same thrill that humans get when they gamble. But at the same time, it's a sneaky way to recycle content with the minimal effort. If a mission in Destiny had a set reward for completing a set task, such as getting a guaranteed Fatebringer for defeating the Templar in the Vault of Glass, content would quickly dry up, as there would be no incentive to replay the same mission besides breaking down the items and materials. If this was the case though, new content would be required at a much faster rate, whether that be new weapons to acquire or new objectives to play. Instead, using the Templar example again, there is only a chance to receive Fatebringer, meaning that if you weren't lucky enough to get it, you would happily play the same content every week in an attempt to receive that item. That is the other issue with loot that allows Destiny to get away with minimal content. Having a weekly lockout period for loot, meaning you need to wait until a weekly reset to have another chance at playing the RNG slot machine. Consider how Destiny would have worked if there was still RNG, but there was no weekly lockout. So you're free to replay the Nightfall and raids as many times as you wanted in the week with the same chance of rewards. This would incur results with more similarities to the set loot system. For example, if it would take 6 weeks to normally acquire a Fatebringer, it took me more like 8 weeks to be honest, you could run the Templar 6 times over a weekend and receive the item far more promptly. Instead, you could easily spend months battling RNG for the gun you wanted, which was definitely the case with one of my clanmates who played daily and never received Yellowhorn as a reward. My solution to the issue of RNG versus set loot would be to keep RNG, but have the drop rate of a gun you already own scaled way back. For example, if there were 10 guns in a loot table and you owned one of them, instead of there being a flat 10% chance to receive any of them, there should be more like a 5% chance to receive the gun you already own, and now a 10.55% chance to receive a new gun. This way you would always be more likely to receive something you don't have, while still being random. Even when you only needed one more gun from the 10 gun loot table, you would have a 55% chance to receive it, more likely than not receiving it. This would of course draw up content faster, but not as fast as just receiving a set reward. To counteract the stale content, simple changes can be made to promote differences without having to create entirely new content. Just off the top of my head, introducing burn modifiers to raid bosses that only affect you without helping you, Nightfall modifiers such as Grounded or Juggler or Epic, or even the Nightfall modifier in raids for the hardcore players. Other modifiers such as shortening the enraged timer limits or even forcing the enraged fight, except for Crota, but these changes hardly take developers time to implement as they're already part of the game. Some other tweaks to provide incentive on repetitive content is to maybe create variations within the guns themselves, besides just the perk list, but to have say like a 10% variation in gun stats such as the impact, the rate of fire, or the stability, etc. That way you could receive guns you wanted, but there would always be a chance to get it to be different. These are just a few ideas, I'm sure there are many others. Moving on. The time between new content and updates. It became alarmingly clear that Destiny was not going to be a content-rich game after the first DLC shipped, where we received half a dozen story missions, 2 strikes, and a new raid. The story missions and strikes provided a good few hours of gameplay, and the raid was challenging and rewarding for the first month or two. Going into the Dark Below, we'd only waited 3 months to receive our first pack of DLC, which at the time seemed a reasonable period of time to establish ourselves in the base game and level up our 3 characters. The hard mode at Crota's End released about 6 or 7 weeks after the initial launch of the Dark Below, which Bungie claimed gave them time to iron out bugs and exploits that were uncovered in the normal mode before releasing the hard mode. While this was the case, it also allowed them to spread out completed content and extend the playtime without much effort, especially considering the only differences in hard mode were a few more mages, and the enraged trigger had a low health percentage, which was negligible if the sword was timed correctly. Still, this wouldn't have been an issue if it was only 3 or so months until the next piece of DLC launched. As it turned out, it was over 6 months between the Dark Blow and the House of Wolves, which meant there was a good 3-month window with no new content. In hindsight, it makes me wonder why I played every day. Also knowing that the grind for all exotics was pointless when some are just going to get left behind, the time between content release in Destiny is beyond unacceptable, but the problem's somewhat worse now as we're receiving minute pieces of content, such as Sparrow Racing and the Crimson Days event, both completed within a few hours and they are months apart. The time between content problem also extends to the Crucible, where any weapon and subclass tweaks occur months apart, and always tends to be mirrored in both PvE and PvP for some reason. Each of these platforms are different and should be treated with different patches. Ultimately, the fix to both PvE and PvP in regards to shortening time between content is to add new content, or to at least have more frequent changes to PvP and PvE separately. As minimal effort seems to be the plan at Bungie, I could suggest a few simple fixes that will give the sensation of fresh content without producing anything new. For PvE, having customizable modifiers or preset modifiers and strikes, where teams have to compete against the clock, or flipping the map so Guardians have to either escape the boss or fight the boss at the other end. For PvP, customizable game modes have been requested since the alpha, which would still be a welcome inclusion. But maybe even having daily or weekly tournaments in the Crucible where players can compare stats in-game and feel like they're progressing. A simple leveling system with prestiges like Call of Duty would also be a method of greatly increasing replay value. Again, just a few ideas, there are many more ways to provide fresh content. It looks like I'm going to have to make this a 2-part video as there's still a few issues I want to discuss. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you're new. Stay tuned for part 2.